Imagine standing at the top of the world. The air is razor thin, your lungs scream for oxygen, and every heartbeat feels like it might be your last. You're at 8,848 meters above sea level, the very roof of the Earth. But here's the haunting truth. If something goes wrong, this mountain will not forgive you. And if you die up here, your body won't come back down. Instead, it will become part of Everest itself. Among these frozen monuments, one figure stood out for years. Climbers whispered her name in the death zone. Some called her Sleeping Beauty. Others simply avoided looking at her face, frozen in eternal rest. She was Frances Arsentev, the first American woman to reach the summit of Everest without supplemental oxygen, and one of its most tragic victims. Before she became a legend of Everest, Frances Arsentev was simply a woman with a dream. She was born in Honolulu, Hawaii in 1958. From the beginning, she lived a life that was anything but ordinary. Raised partly in the United States and abroad, Frances grew up fascinated by the natural world. She wasn't a professional climber at first. She was a mother, a career woman, and an adventurer at heart. Her path to Everest wasn't straightforward. Unlike many climbers who trained their whole lives in the mountains, Frances came to the sport later. In her 30s, she began climbing peaks in the United States, tackling Mount McKinley, Denali, and other great ranges. What made her story so compelling was that she wasn't just climbing for herself. She was climbing to show her young son that life could be extraordinary, that you could chase dreams that seemed impossible. Frances was ambitious, but she was also deeply human. She wasn't the strongest or the most technically skilled climber. She wasn't backed by massive sponsors or world-famous teams, but she had determination, and that was enough to bring her to the Himalayas. Along the way, Frances met Sergei Arsentev, a Russian climber with a fiery passion for the mountains. The two fell in love and eventually married, becoming an inseparable climbing duo. Together, they dreamed bigger. They didn't just want to reach summits, they wanted to make history. In the 1990s, the world of mountaineering was obsessed with Everest. To climb it was to step into immortality. And Frances, alongside Sergei, set her sights on becoming the first American woman to reach the summit of Everest without supplemental oxygen. It was a daring goal. Few men had ever succeeded at such a feat. For a woman, especially one without a lifelong mountaineering background, it was nearly unthinkable. But Everest has a way of luring dreamers, and in May 1998, Frances and Sergei stood at the base of the greatest challenge of their lives. What makes her story so haunting isn't just her ambition, it's how close she came to glory. She did, in fact, reach the summit. But Everest doesn't only test your strength going up. The real danger, as climbers say, begins on the way down, in the thin air of the death zone. Triumph can turn to terror in a heartbeat. And for Frances, her victory on the summit was only the beginning of a nightmare that would end with her body lying in plain sight of every climber who passed by. For nearly a decade, she remained there, her face pale, her body still in climbing gear, frozen as though she had simply fallen asleep. This is the story of Frances Arsentev, a woman who dared to dream, who chased history, and who paid the ultimate price on the slopes of Mount Everest. Her tale is not just about ambition, it's about love, survival, and the cruel reality of a mountain that takes far more than it gives. And as we unravel the details of her final climb, you'll see why she became known as the Sleeping Beauty of Everest. Frances Arsentev's life was never confined to the ordinary. While she worked as an accountant and raised her son, Paul, her heart longed for something more. She wanted to prove, to herself, to her child, that life was meant to be lived, not endured. In her 30s, when most people settle into routine, Frances decided to chase mountains. Her early climbs took her across the United States, but soon her ambitions expanded. She summited Denali, North America's highest peak. That climb was grueling, brutal even, but it unlocked something inside her, the knowledge that she could survive in extremes. From there, she began to hunger for higher challenges, greater risks. Unlike many professional mountaineers who train in climbing gyms and alpine schools, Frances learned by doing. She wasn't reckless, but she wasn't conventional either. She had a quiet determination, the kind of stubborn resilience that mountains often demand. And she had Sergei. Her husband, Sergei Arsentev, was no stranger to the high places of the world. A Russian alpinist with raw strength and experience, Sergei complemented Frances's quieter persistence. Together, they formed a team not just of love, but of ambition. By the late 1990s, Everest had become their shared obsession. But their goal was not the same as that of most climbers. They didn't want just to stand at the top. They wanted to stand there without supplemental oxygen. To the untrained ear, that might sound like a small detail, but in mountaineering, it is everything. Above 8,000 meters, the body starves. Brain cells begin to die. Muscles break down, and the risk of losing consciousness grows with every breath. Supplemental oxygen allows climbers to fight off this decay, to think more clearly, and to move faster. To climb Everest without it is to step closer to death with every movement. Frances wanted to be the first American woman to achieve this. History would remember her forever. In May 1998, Frances and Sergei joined the throngs of climbers converging on Everest. That year, the mountain was crowded, as it so often is in spring. Teams from around the world jostled for space at base camp, setting up their tents on the Khumbu Glacier. For weeks, climbers acclimatized, hiking up and down the icefall, building their strength, waiting for the fateful weather window. Frances was different from many at base camp. She wasn't the loudest nor the most celebrated, but people noticed her determination, the way she carried herself. Those who met her recalled that she was kind, thoughtful, almost reserved. She was not chasing Everest for fame. She was chasing it because she believed she could. When the window came, the Arsentevs began their climb. Without supplemental oxygen, every step was agonizing. Where other climbers moved steadily upward, Frances and Sergei slowed to a crawl. Above 8,000 meters, the body moves at 1/4 its normal pace. Even the simplest actions, clipping into a rope, adjusting a crampon, become monumental tasks. On May 22, 1998, Frances and Sergei pushed past Camp 4, the last camp before the summit. It was the threshold of the death zone. For 3 consecutive days they tried to summit, only to be forced back by exhaustion and the merciless thinness of the air. Their progress was excruciatingly slow. At night, they bivouacked in the open, without tents, exposed to temperatures that could kill in minutes, but Frances was relentless. On May 23rd, she and Sergei finally reached the summit. It was a triumph, a historic moment. Frances had become the first American woman to stand on the summit of Everest without oxygen. She had achieved exactly what she had set out to do, but there was no celebration. The climb had drained them, and the descent was waiting. On Everest, the summit is only halfway. Other climbers who saw Frances that day later remembered her moving slowly, almost dreamlike. Her face was pale, her lips blue. Her body was starved of oxygen, and the high-altitude sickness was setting in. Still, she pushed onward, unaware that every step was leading her not toward safety, but toward tragedy. As the sun set on May 23rd, Frances and Sergei began their descent. They had reached the top of the world, but their journey into the darkness was only beginning. The summit of Everest is often called the halfway point. Climbers who survive long enough to celebrate at the top soon learn that the descent is where the mountain claims its victims. For Frances Arsentev, May 23, 1998, should have been the proudest day of her life. Instead, it marked the beginning of her final hours. Descending without supplemental oxygen was beyond exhausting. Francie's movements became slow, disoriented, almost mechanical. Her husband Sergei stayed close, encouraging her step by step. But as the night closed in, temperatures plunged and the wind tore at their bodies. They had no tent, no reserves of oxygen, nothing but willpower and thin hope. They were forced to bivouac high on the mountain, an open-air night in the death zone. To survive a night here is nearly impossible, yet somehow they endured, clinging to life as the mountain pressed its weight upon them. By the next day, their progress was agonizingly slow. Other climbers overtook them, their faces filled with concern. Francie's was visibly deteriorating. She stumbled, slurred her words, and at times seemed half-conscious. It was clear. She was in the grip of cerebral edema, swelling of the brain caused by extreme altitude. Still, Sergei refused to leave her. Their bond was unbreakable. He tried to guide her down, but the mountain was merciless. As night fell again, they spent a second night exposed above 8,000 meters. Few climbers in history have survived such an ordeal. Francie's would not be among them. On the third day, Sergei made a desperate decision. He left Francie's briefly to descend for help, planning to bring oxygen back to her. But in the chaos of Everest's ridges, he vanished. Accounts differ, but it's believed that Sergei fell to his death while attempting to descend. His body would later be found far below. Francie's was left utterly alone. Disoriented, hypoxic, and freezing, she collapsed in the snow. She was alive, but only barely. That day, a group of Uzbek climbers came across Francie's. She was still conscious, though slipping quickly. They tried to help, giving her oxygen, attempting to move her, but she was too weak, too far gone. After hours of exhausting effort, they were forced to make the cruelest choice: abandon her or die with her. Later, an American climber, Ian Woodall, and his South African partner Kathy O'Dowd encountered Francie's as well. They too tried desperately to save her. She murmured weakly, repeating words that haunted them. "Don't leave me. Why are you doing this to me?" But the death zone is a place of brutal reality. They could not carry her. Every step with her weight would mean their own deaths. After agonizing hours, they made the heart-shattering decision to let her go. On May 24th, 1998, Frances Arsentev died on the slopes of Everest. She became another victim claimed by the mountain, her body frozen in the snow. But unlike others, her corpse remained in a hauntingly visible position. For nearly a decade, climbers ascending by the north route passed her. They saw her face, pale and waxen, framed by her climbing gear, as though she had simply fallen asleep. It earned her the chilling nickname, the Sleeping Beauty of Everest. Her husband Sergei's body was eventually discovered lower down, tangled in ropes. Their love story ended in tragedy, both of them left to the mountain. Francie's death was not just another statistic. It symbolized the cruel cost of ambition, the merciless reality of Everest. Her story spread around the climbing community like wildfire. To many, she became a symbol, not just of daring, but of fragility, of the human body's limits when faced with the mountain's indifference. Climbers who passed her were deeply shaken. Some said they avoided looking at her. Others whispered prayers. But no one forgot her. Frances Arsentev had reached her dream, but the price was ultimate. Her ambition to stand on top of the world without oxygen brought her to immortality, not in life, but in death. For years, her frozen body remained a marker on the path, a reminder to all who dared. On Everest, triumph and tragedy are separated by a single breath. For almost a decade, Frances Arsentev's body remained on the northern route of Everest. Climbers ascending toward the summit could not avoid her presence. She was positioned in such a way that her figure seemed almost peaceful, her face turned upward, her arms by her sides as though she had simply laid down to rest. But the reality is far darker. Each passing climber was confronted not just with the sight of her frozen body, but with a chilling reminder of what Everest demands. Many whispered that her presence haunted them, an image that returned in their dreams long after they had descended. She became part of the mountain itself, a marker etched into its slopes. The nickname spread quickly, the Sleeping Beauty of Everest. It was beautiful, poetic, and horrifying. Francie's death ignited a firestorm of debate within the climbing community. Many asked the same question: why didn't anyone save her? The stories of those who encountered her, climbers who tried but failed to help, were shared and dissected. Some condemned them, accusing them of cruelty for leaving a woman to die. Others defended them, reminding the world that the death zone is not a place where heroics can survive. To carry a dying climber down from such altitude is almost impossible. Even the strongest mountaineer risks death with each added pound of weight. In the mountaineering world, her tragedy became a brutal lesson. Compassion and survival often collide, and on Everest, survival usually wins. When Sergei's body was discovered further down the slopes, tangled in ropes, the story of the couple deepened in tragedy. Frances had died alone, while her husband perished trying to save her. Their bond became legend. Two lovers united in ambition, both claimed by the same mountain within days of each other. For many, their story echoed a dark romance almost, Shakespearean in scope, devotion, sacrifice, and a fatal ending. Documentaries, books, and news features painted their tale as one of both inspiration and horror. As the years went on, climbers ascending Everest sometimes treated Frances less as a person and more as a landmark. Photos circulated online. Some posed near her. Others described the eerie feeling of brushing past her frozen hand, accidentally touching her as they clipped into ropes nearby. The mountain turned her into a grim attraction. In hushed tones, she was referenced in expedition briefings. After the second step, you'll pass Sleeping Beauty. Don't look too long. Everest had always been dotted with bodies, but Francie's face, visible and preserved, made her different. She wasn't just a corpse in a down suit. She was recognizable, human, unforgettable. Many climbers who saw her carried the trauma for years. Kathy O'Dowd, the South African mountaineer who had tried to help her, spoke of the experience with lingering and gish, the helplessness of watching someone die, the cruelty of being forced to walk away. It left scars that never fully healed. For others, seeing Frances was the moment they realized Everest wasn't just a mountain, it was a graveyard. In 2007, nearly a decade after her death, Ian Woodall, one of the climbers who had once tried to save her, returned to Everest. This time he wasn't there to climb for glory. He came with a team for one purpose: to move Francie's body, to give her a measure of dignity after years of being displayed to the world. They carefully relocated her remains off the main path, covering her with the mountain's ice and snow. She would still remain on Everest forever, but no longer as a spectacle for passing climbers. Woodall later described the act as a final promise fulfilled, a gesture of respect for a woman who had become more than just another victim. Even after her body was hidden from sight, the legend of Sleeping Beauty remained. Francie's story continues to be told in climbing circles, documentaries, and now across the internet. To many, she embodies the razor-thin line between triumph and tragedy. She also symbolizes the controversial morality of Everest, the way ambition can outweigh compassion, and how even those who desperately want to save another life can't escape the mountain's grip. Her legacy endures not because she was the first woman to die on Everest, but because of the haunting image she left behind and the heartbreaking devotion of the husband who tried to rescue her. Frances Arsentev's frozen body became one of the most infamous sights on Everest, a story retold by climbers, journalists, and armchair adventurers alike. The woman who dreamed of climbing without oxygen became eternal in a way she never intended, a silent guardian of the mountain, a warning to those who followed. She is no longer visible, but her legend lingers in every gust of wind that sweeps across Everest's northern face. Her story is not just about death. It is about memory, love, ambition, and the unforgiving truth that on Everest, the mountain always decides. On May 23, 1998, Frances Arsentev etched her name into history. She became the first American woman to stand on Everest's summit without oxygen. Yet the price she paid was everything. Her triumph turned into tragedy within hours, and her dream froze into permanence on the mountain's slopes. For years afterward, she was not just a memory, she was a presence. Climbers passed her, whispered about her, and carried her image back into the world. Her story was told around campfires, in base camps, in living rooms of climbers who swore they would never forget the sight of her pale, frozen face. She was the dreamer who reached the top, and the ghost who warned everyone who came after. Everest is unforgiving. It does not care about ambition, or romance, or legacy. It does not bend to courage. It accepts only what it chooses to accept. And Frances's story reminds us, on this mountain, it is never the climber who decides. It is always the mountain. Today, when people speak of sleeping beauty, they don't just speak of a corpse. They speak of a woman who dared, a woman who chased something beyond comfort, beyond safety, beyond reason. And in doing so, she left behind not only her life, but a legend. Her story forces us to ask ourselves uncomfortable questions. Frances Arsentev was not the first to die on Everest, and she will not be the last. But her death, her frozen reminder, has endured because it is both haunting and human. She was not a faceless climber lost to the void. She was a mother, a wife, a dreamer, and the image of her eternal rest has given her story weight far beyond her lifetime. As you hear this story, remember that Frances is just one of over 300 souls who never came down from Everest. Their bodies remain scattered along the routes, frozen markers of ambition, cautionary tales for those who still dare to climb. Everest is not only the highest point on Earth, it is also one of the coldest cemeteries. For every triumphant summit photo, there are countless unseen tragedies. Frances' story is simply one that refuses to fade because her presence was unforgettable, her ending unforgettable. And perhaps that is why we are drawn to these stories, not to gawk at tragedy, but to confront the razor's edge of human ambition, to see, in people like Frances, a reflection of ourselves, the longing for more, the hunger to leave something behind, the willingness to push past the limits of safety for the chance at meaning. Her story is terrifying, yes, but it is also inspiring, because even though the mountain claimed her life, it could not erase her dream. That dream still lives in the retelling, in the remembering, in the warning her frozen image left behind. If this story has stayed with you, if you felt the chill of the mountain air as Frances struggled for her last breaths, if you wondered what it means to chase a dream so far that it consumes you, then you understand why these tales must be told. This is not just about mountains, this is about people, about us. At Ben Stories, we uncover the forgotten, the haunting, the human side of Everest and beyond. We bring you closer to the voices of those who never made it back, and the lessons they leave behind. If you want more stories like Frances, if you want to explore the mysteries, tragedies, and triumphs hidden in the world's most dangerous places, then don't let this be the last time we meet. Subscribe to Ben Stories, share this story so others may remember, and join us as we continue to walk the line between ambition and tragedy, between glory and the grave. Because these are not just stories of the dead, they are reminders to the living.